This is Antic, the Atari Games podcast.
People say Atari died, in 83? Didn't happen. Didn't happen. We were in Milpitas making video games. We made great video games.
This is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Jeff Bell worked for Atari Games for 31 years. He started in 1973 as a Pong inspector, then moved to the engineering department, specifying requirements for parts. He also worked in IT and system administration and did other jobs in his more than 3 decades with the company. He also ran the Itsy Bitsy bulletin board system, which ran on Atari computers. This interview took place on November 7, 2015. In it, we discuss Bob Stahl, whom I previously interviewed.
All right, so I am audio recording this, and will be lightly edited and then used in Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast, where people will hear the 8-hour episode of your 31-year career with Atari.
Well, I'm wearing my Game Over t-shirt,
Nice.
okay, which was the last thing we did before we closed the doors back in the day.
So, what year were you hired by Atari?
Nolan offered me a job in 1972.
Okay, so let's go even back even before. Why did he offer you a job? How did you know him?
It was a friend of mine who was working, Derek Becker, was working at a company collecting coins out of cigarette machines. Got pissed at his boss one day, went looking for a job, found a job emptying coins out of pinball machines for a company called Syzygy in Santa Clara, California. And Derek, and of course that was the early days of Atari. That was just as Pong was being developed back in June of '72. Derek came to see me. He told me about this great new job he had, and it was exciting. A few weeks later, a friend of mine came over to the house and on his motorcycle said, "There's something at the Sunnyvale Bowl you got to see." Jumped on the bike, went over there, and there was a computer space from Nutting Associates. I put the only $5 I had to my name in the darn thing, and I wanted to do this. I wanted to work on this, and I had no way of ever getting into it. No skills, no nothing. I knew some electronics, but how you get into something like that, I don't know. Pretty soon, all my friends were working at Syzygy Atari. Everybody that I knew was working there. That's the way it was. They were just hiring everybody. And I went down with my friend Keith one day and played Pong for a half hour, met Nolan. He asked me when I was done playing Pong, he says, "What do you think?" And I says, "I love it. This is great." He goes, and we talked, and he goes, "You want a job?" And I said, "Yeah." So I officially started working in February of '73. I was employee number 72, and I started as a Pong inspector. So of all those original coin-op Pongs that were developed or produced, I was one of 3 final inspectors. You'll find my stamp in the back on the monitor shelf. Where is the darn thing? Big 12 in a circle. Those are mine. And that was how it started. Started making Pongs, and it was boom time. We moved to the. I actually started at the roller rink in Santa Clara, and where we could put 200 Pongs on the floor, and it was the most wonderful sound in the world. This old roller rink filled with Pongs with the ball stuck between the paddles. Nothing like it. Like I say, the rest is history, I suppose. But
Awesome. All right, so you're building Pongs, and then somehow, then what? I mean, how?
Well, we could do no wrong. We could do no wrong back then. We made our first $1 million, our second $1 million. We moved to Los Gatos, California, which is not far from where I am right now, and continued making Pongs. That was that great era of 74, 75, where we were just making all kinds of the classics just started coming out. Those original ones, Pong doubles, Grand Track, the first driving games, and Breakout of all things. Breakout, great games. And then we, just to compress, we moved to Santa Clara again, back to Santa Clara. To two buildings at a different place in Santa Clara, and continued to produce. We merged with Key Games, which was that part of Atari that was really Atari, but not Atari for all kinds of silly reasons. We merged together in '75 at the Santa Clara location, and we made more great hits. Tank. Indy 800.
So how were you involved?
I was an inspector. I was a final inspector at the beginning. Then I became a incoming inspector for first article stuff, and every part that came in went through us. And when we started making driving games, it was starting to get a bit too much for me. I was really good with Pong, but the driving games started to wear on me a little bit. And
why did the driving games wear on you?
Boring.
Yeah.
They were boring. I wanted to do more with my career, and final inspection was fun, but it wasn't. There was not much of a path in it. Incoming inspection, quality assurance. I was starting to take classes and stuff, and that looked like a career that I could stay with, and I did that. And over up until in 75, 76, they started. That's the corporate days when they started over in Sunnyvale, California. And one of the people in engineering who was doing all the documentation for all the parts and stuff suddenly left on Christmas Eve. He just quit. And one of the engineers who I had known for a long time came over and asked me if I wanted to go to engineering. Serendipity. I mean, fall in my lap. And I said, yeah. And I took over this guy's position at corporate headquarters in Sunnyvale, California. And every single part that we bought from another company, all the purchased parts went through me. I had to draw them. I had to document them. I had to source them. And so I became a technical writer, writing all kinds of stuff, specifications for everything from screws to TVs, and learning a lot as we went on. Over time, engineering split into another building across the street, the infamous 1272 Borregas. And that's where the magic really started to happen in the 80s. Early 80s, we had hits, Asteroids, every one of them, just a Centipede, all of them right there, right then. And I was right in the middle of it. And when the consumer division had been started up all this time, we were making stunt cycles and Pongs, the original home Pong. Occasionally we would go over there. They would ask us to work at Christmas time and stuff to help boost production, and we would work with the old crews that we worked with back in the day, stuffing PC boards back on Martin Ave, and putting screws in stunt cycles and just having a blast, just mostly for fun. And they had those were the boom times of Atari. Boom times, 76, 77, 78, 79. We were flushing money. We had 30 buildings in Sunnyvale, 30 buildings. And I don't know how many thousands of people. It was fantastic. And the consumer division had grown. The Pong was phenomenal, of course. We had other ones that were great too, and then they started making home computers. I mean, back in when we were at on Winchester Boulevard in Los Gatos, Steve Jobs put forth the proposition of making computers for people, and I remember seeing him in the hallway and seeing the computer and going, "Gee, I would love to have something like that." But there's number one, I don't know what I would do with it. Number two, I could never afford it, and Atari didn't want to have anything to do with it at the time, so he went off and started some other company, and but then the Apple II was out, Apple I, Apple II came out, and the Atari 800 came out, and they made us an offer in engineering, and this is where the beauty starts. We'll give you a computer. You have to sign for it, and if you do something useful with it, it won't cost you anything. I signed me up. So I signed for $1,200. I got an Atari 800 with 16K of memory. I got an 820 RS-232 box, an 830 acoustic modem, and a single disk drive. And I took it home and I started playing with it. I'm going, what am I going to do with it? I had a friend who had done an Apple BBS. And so I knew what it was. There were darn few BBSs back in this time, darn few. And that very first week I had it, I found some software from another guy at Atari, Harold Strip, who it was called Amos, the Atari,
Messaging and information system or something.
Yeah, something, whatever it was. And written by Ward, with Ward Christensen's X modem protocol finally got in it and stuff. And I loaded that on my computer with my one floppy disk drive, and it was 160K. Stuffed the modem in the muffs, and well, not yet, and waited for a call. I put my number out and waited for a call. Midnight, phone rings. I jump out of bed. I run in there. I take the phone. I stuff it in the muffs, and I watch the magic happen. And so right then and there, I started. That was when my bulletin board, Itsy Bitsy bulletin board system started up. It was Itsy Bitsy because it was small. It was really, really small. It didn't have anything to do with spiders. And throughout that night, I got more calls. And every time the phone would ring, I would run out and stuff it in the muffs and watch. And it was one at a time. It was 300 baud. It was terribly slow. And the next day, I was so burned out from lack of sleep that I had to do something about it. So I took my 300 baud acoustic modem and an old phone, which I don't think you could still own them at the time, that I had torn apart, and a Volkswagen windshield wiper motor, and made my first auto answer modem out of that 300 baud acoustic modem. I still have it. It works. It's great. And then I didn't have to get up all night long. And I would get up in the morning and look at the result. Actually, I would sit there and watch it a lot, too. A lot of time just watching people get in and call and look for stuff. And it kind of took on a life of its own. Eventually, I got a call I got a message on my printer. Some guy wanted to ask me if I wanted another phone line. And I said, well, really, I need more disk drives. And he said, well, I got some here. If you can make them work, you can have them. Well, I didn't know at the time, but he worked at Atari too. He was the first article inspector at the computer division. And so he had parts, and went over his house and got parts. Soon I had 4 disk drives and more and more stuff. Along the way, I quit using Amos, of course. Amos was a good starting place for the BBS, but I soon moved on to Matt Singer's Forum BBS, which was kind of based on it, but it seemed to grow a lot faster. And Matt and I had a little understanding. He wanted to sell his software, and I wanted to give software away. And so he would let me put up his old version for people to download for free, and I would help them get their BBS started, and he would work on the latest version. And I would get the latest version too, but I wouldn't give that away. And then, oh boy, it grew. People were calling my BBS to get BBS software. In fact, there's a book here. I didn't know I had this right here. This book here.
Free software for your Atari. Yep.
Yeah, back of the book. There's a picture of me.
Haha. Nice.
I was not a pirate. I was not a pirate. No way. No way. Was I a pirate? I didn't give away stuff, but here it was, how to start your own BBS. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I got calls like crazy. And another guy, I was still working at CoinOp at Atari. One of our computer systems people had come up with a interface board so we could hook up to standard 8-inch floppy drives. And this is before the AT 8000.
ATR 8000.
Yeah, that guy. So there I was. I suddenly had the first Atari BBS with 1 megabyte of storage on 2 8-inch floppies. This was a bottomless pit of storage. And, 8-bit video games back in the day for the Atari were small, and I had everything. If it was out there, it was on my BBS. Now, I wasn't a pirate, but my position was, people are putting this stuff on my bulletin board, and you can't possibly expect me to be able to comb through all this stuff and pick out the stuff that you shouldn't have. If you steal it, you're the thief, not me. That worked for me. I justified it.
So there was a tacit approval on your part.
Yeah. Anyway. And along the way, there was lots of hacking going on. Lots of hacking on my part. I became a phone freak. I learned a lot about computer systems and had a lot of fun. Got a lot of phone calls. Yeah. And without incriminating myself too much, soon my little 8-bit computer had grown. I'd maxed it out with 48K in memory. I had the large floppy drives, but it wasn't doing enough. And I switched from the homemade acoustic auto answer modem that ran off my joystick ports, by the way. And I went to my first 300 baud auto answer Hayes, 1200 on up, and but the computer itself wasn't doing enough. So I added a second Atari computer to the stack, and they were interfaced through the joystick ports. And when a user wanted to do something on the BBS that wasn't on that node, it would switch them to the other 800 computer on another node. I ended up having 3 of these, and I still have them. They're great. Haven't turned them on in years and years and years. So then I got a what did I get? I got a 5 megabyte hard drive, a Corvus. This thing cost a fortune. It was magnificent. It is a 5 megabyte hard drive. It was incredible. And but it would freak out every once in a while. Fault light would come on the front of the box, so I put a photocell on it. Whenever the fault light would come on, one of the Ataris would sense the fault light coming on and hit the reset button, and so it kept it up all the time. And then I got a 10 megabyte, and then a 20 megabyte. I loved the Corvus drives; they were great. I still have. And it just went on and on and on. It was a bottomless pit of stuff. And we kept giving away the BBS software. That was the biggest thing of all.
So you were the home base for the forum BBS software.
Well, Matt gave his own stuff away too, but I gave away my fair share. Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of people got to try being their own system operators. Being a system operator was just like it was like I loved it. I loved it. My son grew up hearing modems screech in the night. We knew what was going on the BBS by the clicks and the whirs that we heard. We knew what somebody was doing. They're checking their mail. They're downloading a file, and they're switching to one of the other nodes, because I used relays in those days. Eventually, it became boring too. I was hacking stuff, and this was a great way of connecting with people. I was spending a lot of time on my own, 2-3 o'clock in the morning, connecting with people all over the world, and getting free phone calls to do it. Because that's what it was all about, is how are you going to pay for this hobby, and you had to do it by hacking phone lines, and so I started by hacking my own Sprint account back in the day. When I saw that I could do that, then I was off, and I never got arrested. I was pretty careful about what I did. I would use a number once or twice and then give it away. So other people got in trouble for my actions, and that was a terrible thing, in hindsight. But I learned a lot, and at Atari, as the years went on, I got my first word processing machine, because I was a writer, and I instantly learned how to program those, and better ones and better ones. And the years went on, I just became really good at computers. And then when IBM, that was the trick. When IBM came out with the personal PC, it was like, you bastards. Because we knew that was the end of it. The Apple IIs, the Ataris, the Commodores, the Amigas. Who wants this? The IBM wins. And they were terrible. But we had them, and they started to show up at work, and nobody knew how to use them. Well, I ended up knowing how to use them, and I learned how to use them, and partly that into a career. I ended up moving into IT at Atari, and the beginning of the internet. And I was IT system administrator for still at CoinOp, for all the game designers and everything, and ended up, in 1973, I was the last guy out. I turned off the lights and walked out. I unplugged all the computers.
73?
83, 2003. The years ago, yeah. Yeah, right. 2003, like the shirt says, 2003. I'm still in IT. I still do that. I've gone to other, lots of other companies since then. But it all started way back there with Atari.
So how did you? Okay, you were there for Nolan, and then you were there for Warner, and then apparently you stayed for the transition to the Tremels, and you stayed through the end. How did you manage to weather all of those changes? Because I've talked to so many people who were just like, and the Tremels came in and they fired us all, or I didn't like the situation after such and such happened. I mean, you just
yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, I stayed in CoinOp, as we say, the real Atari. So when Jack Tramiel came in, and he fired everybody down to the last janitor. He didn't have anything to add to the mix. He just they came out with a couple of products that were already in the pipeline, and it was a devastating time to see the company have to go this way. What happened was, people want to make money, and our corporate overlords wanted to make money. And Atari was the first company to lose $800 million in a year and not die back in the late 70s. They were flushing money, and there was such waste. It didn't have to be that way, but it was.
Tell me a story. Tell me a story about wasting money.
Ray Kassar was an ass. And that's the phrase you hear from people all over. Ray Kassar was an ass. He had his own private chef, you know. There was a lot of excesses. There were a lot of excesses, especially on the consumer side. They went their way. And we split off in coin-op, and we went our own way, too. And we were still successful. You know, people say Atari died, you know, in 83? Didn't happen. Didn't happen. We were in Milpitas making video games. We made great video games. And all the way up to the end, we ended up being bought by our friends, the mob, Midway, right? And they were able to buy us. Nolan came in. Nolan was going around. He was trying to buy the company back, and he came through with a bunch of investors. And he came by my office, and I said, "Nolan, buy us back," you know, because I'd work for Nolan again. And he says, "I'm trying to," but they ended up selling it to Midway for $25 million in paper. And Midway said, "You guys pay this off in 2 years or your history." Well, we had one hit game, San Francisco Rush, paid for it in 1 year, and but it still wasn't enough for Midway, and they ended up shutting down coin-op video game production entirely. You know, there's lots of reasons why that went. And we ended up just making consumer games again under the Tengen name and under the Midway name there in Milpitas. And we shut down manufacturing, and it was just software development at that point. Kind of sad. And then it wasn't even enough for Midway, you know, and they closing down studios in Australia, San Diego. They closed down the studio in Milpitas, and there was no more West Coast video game production, you know, from us. Yeah. And eventually they closed down their production back in Chicago too. And you know, where are they today? I don't know. I think they're gone, right? And nobody's making pinballs anymore except for Stern. Video games, you know, it's all, you know, Electronic Arts, and not really into it so much anymore, you know. I do the computers, and I have a lot more fun with that. But, you know, video games, oh, God. You know, that was, well, here, look at this. Here we go. There, excuse me for a second. There we go. Here's my collection of Atari badges.
Okay, so we've got a huge collection of badges on lanyards and things.
Yeah. You know, this is going back to everything, you know. I got a lot. I got a lot of badges. Yeah.
Nice.
But how did I weather it? Oops, sorry. How did I weather it? We had a layoff every year.
Yeah.
Whether we needed it or not. We had so many layoffs. Our softball team was called the Survivors. They wore camouflage uniforms. I got laid off once too, and I was off work for 3 months. I didn't know what I was going to do. I'd never had a real job in my life, and my boss called me back and said, "Will you come back?" And I said, "Heck yeah!" And I went back. They gave me all my seniority back and everything, so it was like I'd never left. And but we had layoffs every year, and it was always heart-wrenching. We always knew that it was going to happen. We didn't know who it was going to happen to. They often happened without regard to how important somebody was. They would have to cut a certain percentage, and that's how many got cut. And so, you know, so many people over the years came and left. But at our last reunion in 2012, the coin-op reunion, we had 250 people from all years, and the tightest group of former employees you will ever find anywhere. And it's magnificent. But everybody got cut, and in the end, I was the last guy out. I got cut too. I got to delete my boss's account, you know. I sent out we used to have a tradition when somebody would leave, they would send out an email to the everyone distribution group saying bye, see ya. And when it was my turn, there was no distribution group to send out to. So, but we had collected email addresses for everybody, their private email addresses. So I sent the last one out of the mail server to everyone, shut it down, unplugged it, carted it off, sent to the recycler. But yeah, we had surviving Atari was, I didn't want to leave. It was my, to paraphrase Melville, it was my Harvard, it was my Yale. I learned everything I knew there. They sent me to school. I learned enormous amounts. I partly didn't into a career. I'm near retirement now, and I'm still doing the same stuff. We loved working at Atari. I loved working at Atari. Yeah, if I had to do it all over again, heck yeah, in a heartbeat. The day we were picking up hitchhikers and giving them jobs, and everybody wanted to work at Atari. Atari changed history, and it changed the way people work here in Silicon Valley. And I was able to be a part of history. And when at the beginning, I didn't have any idea how I could have anything to do with something like this, like computer space. And as it turns out, I did.
Nice. Cool. So you worked on some arcade games that people love. I mean, you worked on Robotron, and I think you worked somehow on Rescue on Fractalus for one of the home systems. And
Nope, never worked on the home systems. Okay. But my name is in the credits of some games because of the position I was in, where I worked on the parts. So in that sense, I worked on every video game we ever made at the coin-op division. The consumer,
by ordering parts, just doing the specs, and that sort of thing.
Right. And I was part of the team, and we would play prototypes and comment on the gameplay, and those things would get incorporated. It was a very close-knit family of people working, in spite of all the people we had working there. There was, you've heard all the stories about how Atari might have been, the parties and stuff. It's all true for the most part, I guess. We were friends. We were a family, and we still are. We still communicate. We're going to have another reunion coming up before too long here. And unfortunately, most of the get-togethers we've had in the last few years have been for, when somebody passed, and we had to go for a memorial service. We lost Steve here recently. And we've been lucky over the years. I think at the last reunion, Nolan read the names. There was about 30. And, it's hard to see old friends pass. But no place like Atari ever existed, probably ever will. We changed history. We made history. And we had a blast doing it. Not a lot to do with 8-bit stuff, but there was a lot of 8-bit stuff in there. I could run out in the shed and get my old Atari that's nailed to a piece of pine. You'd love that.
Why is it nailed to a piece of pine?
Because plastics were really, really hard to get. The plastic parts that your 800 was in, those were really hard to get. I could get the guts. I could get circuit boards, but I couldn't get the plastics. Those were hard. So, and heck, back at the time, I didn't, have a lot of screws. I had nails.
Yeah.
So, keyboards nailed to the board. A lot of it was really taped together stuff. It was taped together.
So you just get left remnant parts or whatever, and
well, I ended up having, I still have a very, very large collection of Atari parts, I would have say for a disk drive, a floppy disk drive, for instance, I would have maybe the bottom shell, the plastic for the bottom, but I didn't have the top. And so to stack a couple of those, I would have to put some other kind of box around it. My monitor for my BBS was a 13-inch monitor from the sub game from CoinOp inside a 7-Up crate. My cabinets that held my all my discs and my hard drives were the cabinets that the 25-inch General Electric televisions came in originally that we took out and converted into monitors for games like Indy 800. I had access to parts, and I ended up with a lot of parts. And when I was working in component engineering as a writer and as an engineer, I got samples of parts. And I have lots of samples, one of a kind, beautiful, beautiful parts that I'll probably never use, but they're my old friends, and I love looking at them once in a while. Once in a while, I'll pull one out, and I will have a use for it, not very often. But it was a great way to go through my young adulthood and to, like I said, it's to be a part of something that turned out to be historic. When I didn't go to MIT. I didn't have an advanced degree in information technologies. I took Fortran at City College in 1970. Come on, I didn't have any way of getting into a business like this, and I ended up having the high score.
Nice.
As far as
31 years, you said, right?
Yeah, it was a little over 31 years. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. My last day was really in 2004. We left a couple of ladies from Midway who were there to answer the phones for customer service, and that was my last day. It was like January of 2004. I got 31 weeks of severance pay, and I got in my car and started to drive. I figured I'll just go for a drive, and tried to go to Florida because I'd never been to Florida. I figured I'll go drive the Keys or something. And the closer I got to Texas, the more irritable and discontent I felt. And so I turned around, came back home, and got a job. And I'm glad I did, too. I don't think I would have liked Florida. It's too humid. Nothing wrong with Florida. And now I've gone on in my career, still working at computers, had some great times. Nothing's like it was back in the day, though. Atari was magnificent. It was my home. I would have worked there for free.
So you said you still have your BBS stuff. Have you archived that stuff and moved the stuff to modern media and just to skid off those old Corvus drives and before they rot away?
No.
Why don't you do that?
I should. I do have a lot of Atari stuff on DVDs and CDs and stuff. I have a really large MAME collection. I don't use it though. It's kind of I got an Xbox.
Yeah.
Like everybody else now, and it's
but I'm concerned about the stuff that you have the only copy of, for instance.
Well, there might be something like that, and that's a damn good idea. I ought to look at that.
I mean, like the message boards on your BBS.
Oh yeah.
I mean, save that stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, I used to print out logs of everybody who came through my system, and many years ago I threw away boxes of that thermal paper, because it was just turning black anyway. But I still have my discs. They're in good condition. So, yeah, but you're right. I should make an effort to get those off. It might be problematic for some of them, but I still have the, I have an ST. I have a couple STs. I have a Falcon. I have an Atari Falcon in the box that I've never used. But I could. I've seen some other projects that people had out there to interface to put an Atari on Ethernet. So I could do that, and then I could archive stuff off pretty easily. That'd be pretty good. Yeah. Well, you got one over there?
Well, I have an Ethernet card around here somewhere. But I was thinking, the way I often archive things is an SIO to SD device.
Uh-huh.
That lets you just copy a floppy disk to an SD card
Yeah,
and
great idea.
walk it over to your Mac or your PC, whatever, and
Yeah.
that's super
You
easy.
know, I really hadn't considered it. I didn't think that, looking back, you're right. I really should. But I never really considered doing it. I thought of bringing it back up just to see it run. But yeah, you have a good point. I
But
think
as
I'll
like
look
a time
at that.
capsule, like here's a
Yeah,
BBS from back in the day, locked in time. Let's see what
right,
that would be
right,
awesome.
right. Well, I do have the domain name, so
Itsy bitsy
Itsy
BBS.
Bitsy BBS. Yeah, I've got the domain name. Um,
Nice.
I don't have it up. It doesn't do anything, but I'm not going to let anybody else grab it. But yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea, Kevin. Thanks for the
If
thought.
you need a hand, I have I can help you, but it sounds like you've got the equipment to do it. So if you have the time,
I'm trying to we whittle down my equipment. I got way too much stuff. I have tons of consumer stuff that people have given me over the years. People would give me their Atari stuff because they couldn't use it anymore, and they said, "Can you find us a good home?" And not really, but I kept it. I've got 2 storage units that I've been paying on for over 30 years, full of stuff. And my wife and I are trying to weed through it. It's very difficult. As you get older, you want to get rid of some of this stuff. But I have tons of Atari stuff that I really need to get rid of and move on. But I think my original friends, the 800s, my 3 800s, and my Corvus drives, those aren't going anywhere anytime soon. But I should get them up and running, and I should try to archive that stuff off. That's a great idea.
cool, nice. If you could send a message to the people who called you BBS back in the day, some of whom might be listening to this podcast, what would you tell them?
Boy, it was fun. It was fun. Um, we would watch. My son and I would watch as people had this wonderful experience of logging into an interactive computer system, of sending messages to each other, of downloading BBS software, and then coming back and announcing their BBS on the message board. It was a great time, and for everybody who had any contact with it, whether it's a system operator or it's just somebody who called in, I hope you had a blast, because I did.
Nice. What haven't I asked you that I should have?
I don't know. There's way too much to talk about.
Well, I feel like
Yeah.
if we did if we did another interview tomorrow, it could go in a completely different direction, and we could
Different, yeah.
talk for another hour and get something else entirely different. But
Yeah,
you know,
Atari. I can go on about Atari forever. Ask my wife. Yeah, I go on for Atari forever and ever. There's so many stories. It was such a wonderful experience. We made history here in the Valley. I've always worn jeans to work my whole career, and I've worked for big companies and small, and that's comes straight from Atari. The work ethic that we had, where we had fun. We took fun seriously. We really did. And we started off just making innovative leisure, and we kept doing that throughout it all. The corporate stuff came and went. The people with MBAs came and went. But that core group of people who loved working at Atari was always there. Kind of cycled through people, but we were always there. And for a company that lasted so long, there were a lot of really old employees still there at the end. There were many, many, many. In 2002, 2003 is when they all got laid off. Most of the ones that were left got laid off. And but it was like nothing else ever was. Yeah. So you see that old Atari game at an arcade someplace, go put a quarter in it. Have some fun.
nice. Thank you, Jeff.
All right, Kevin. It's been real.
It's been great.
Any other time.
If you enjoyed these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.